This video might be a little boring to some viewers, but I just wanted to give a little insight on what we do once we pick up a small piece of permission, specifically a small old cattle pasture or working cattle property. This is the kind of place where we're not going to be able to put our own food in terms of food plots. And then it's also the kind of property that it's not going to hold a lot of deer year round due to the lack of cover, being that it's all pretty much cattle pasture that's been mowed down and eaten by the cattle. And then of course the fact that the cattle are there for a good portion of the year, there's not going to be a lot of deer calling this place home. So I wanted to do a short video on walking a property like this and how we approach setting up on a place like this, where you're going to be focused on rut type of travel, rut type travel corridor, rut type stand locations, and where we potentially set up some cameras for some intel, and where we pick out certain spots that, judging by old travel sign and just the way that the terrain lays, where you're going to pick out these specific possible stand locations. And what I like to do, as you'll see in the video, I like to start at the perimeter of the property where all these old cattle pastures, they obviously have fences to keep the cattle in. You can pretty easily find some old fence crossings that the deer will use, and then from there, judging by how the terrain lays and this property specifically, how the creek runs on it and how we expect the deer to be moving directionally, from there you can get a pretty good idea of how we expect the deer to be sort of funneled down and moving through this property during the rut. As you'll see in the video, I pick out a handful of trees that could be possible stand locations, and based on what winds we're going to be mostly hunting this place on and the access to those stand locations. From there, we're just going to be waiting on more sign to pop up the closer we get to fall, and once we get closer to the rut, and then hopefully we can start to get some photos on whatever trail cameras we set up on this property that gives us some intel of what kind of bucks are traveling through this place. Hopefully at that point we can single out, a mature buck or two that we're interested in hunting. And from there, we go into one of these different stand locations that we've pinpointed prior, set up, and on the right wind, sneak in there. You've got the access laid out, and you're able to hunt based on the intel that that buck is on its feet in daylight, cruising around looking for his first doe or his next doe or whatever the case may be. There's not a lot to see on this property right now, and not a ton of true scouting traditional sign that needs to be done, mainly because of the size of the property, the type of property it is, being that it's covered up in cattle right now, and the fact that the deer most likely only utilize this property during the rut. So it's not really scouting deer sign at the time that I first stepped foot on this piece. It's more or less getting boots on the ground and getting a general lay of the land to aid in interpreting how I expect the deer to travel through this property when the time comes. So yeah, that's what this video is about. It's short, it might be a little boring to some viewers, but as always, thank you for watching. I appreciate the support. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button. It'll help me out a whole bunch. And yeah, here's the video. I filmed this on my phone, which because I made a mistake, forgot the SD card to my GoPro at home, but that's okay. It's August, what is today? August 13th, and I'm actually checking out a new permission property that we just picked up. It's a small property, and there's not a lot on it. It's mostly cattle pasture, and it's mostly mowed cattle pasture, but there's a nice creek that winds through it, a pretty good sized creek. We've got good timber adjacent to this property on both sides of it, really, within a mile on each side. One side is a lot closer than that, but there is cattle on the property right now, so I was a little hesitant to whether or not I'd put a camera out, because inevitably you're going to get a lot of pictures of cattle. We should have this place free of cattle for the rut, which is when we're going to be focusing on this farm more than any other time. It looks like there's probably some big oaks at the back, but for the most part it's just going to be catching a buck cruising through here from this piece of timber that's back this way to this other big timber that's probably a mile down the road that way. So I'm gonna get to walk and get to looking around a little bit and see what kind of sign I can turn up and maybe get a couple cameras out. I'm excited to just walk a new piece of property, to be honest. Found the first, probably not the first, but pretty good fence crossing right here. It's easy. Probably you can't see it on camera, but there's a trail, very faint trail, coming right down through this grass. That's a definite good fence crossing right there. Possible stand opportunities right here. There's a really nice hackberry and then a walnut next to it, but that hackberry's got some better cover on it. It's very, very faint. Probably a good camera option right there, or maybe one of these in this bundle. And I reached the south end of the property. I'm at the boundary, basically. Fence line is just right back here behind me. You can probably see a post right there. So now I'm gonna have to cut through this timber. This timber actually backs up to the property boundary on this side. Yeah, I don't know, probably can't see it on camera, but it's just super thick for me to go through down here. So I think I'm gonna have to go back down and kind of skirt around this patch of timber. I may be able to go back down and cut up through the middle of it to kind of get a feel of what it looks like up in there, but it's really thick. It looks really good, to be honest. A lot better than I thought it would look. I'm gonna keep moving. Wow, this looks a lot better than I thought it would, judging from the map. Here's a honey locust, got some pods hanging off of it. That looks really awesome in there, actually. A lot better than I anticipated. I don't think there's a lot of resident deer that are probably living here right now. Like I said, this is gonna be more of a funnel type of property. I got some visitors back here behind me. They wanna be on camera a little bit. But there is a bean field right out here to the south. So there's food right there. There's a cornfield right out here. So there's a lot of food adjacent to this property as well. So I think there's probably a few deer that call this place home, but once these cows get taken out of here, there's gonna be a lot more activity here. A lot of white and red oaks up on this timber, on this hillside. A couple big shagbark hickory trees, a couple red oaks or white oaks right here. On this hillside down here, there's a couple more shagbark hickories. There's a honey locust down there at the bottom, or almost to the bottom. A lot of good opportunities for some extra food on this property. I'm walking one side of the creek now. There's just so many opportunities for mock scrapes on any of these limbs. Places to hang cameras. And this is just one side of the creek. I haven't even walked the other side of the creek, but I mean, all these hedge limbs hanging down, these are just dynamite for scraping. And there's definitely gonna be some natural scrapes that are gonna pop up here. The closer we get to fall here, and especially the closer we get to the rut, but that's the biggest part of the timber, the thick part up there. The big patch of timber, a lot of oaks up in there. That trail, that big fence crossing that I found is on the other side of it. Something crossing there, cruising through this timber to scent check it, or coming down through this bottom. You could just see something coming down here, hitting a scrape. And that's another good thing. There's several different good opportunities to hang a stand. Really, any of these hedges, you're not gonna get too high, but that's a good tree there. You get in here,
This would be a great place. Come down on the side of this hill, hunt it with your wind blowing that way back towards the truck. Come down here, pop up across the creek, either pop up right there, right here. There's that tree right there. There's a good option of a hedge right here, but also there's a really good option right here of another really nice hackberry. Hackberries are nice to hang in. Usually they're pretty straight, and usually they got a decent amount of cover on them. They do lose their leaves fairly early, but good option for a hackberry right there. For a stand site, have some mock scrapes set up right here. Be running the camera on any one of these smaller hedges back in here. That hackberry sits right back in there. You have to trim a little bit of this out for a shot. Hopefully catch something cruising, coming after they scent check through this timber or coming around through this bottom, just following along the edge of this creek. And that would be a perfect little ambush spot right there. You can't even see that tree right now, but we get this whole area lined up with some mock scrapes and get a stand hung back in there. There's that hackberry right there. Perfect. Have you a shooting lane right here. Cut a lane back here on the other side. And I like that too for access because we can slip down. There's a big hill that comes down right here. Slip down the backside of that hill and then get right here. Basically, you could actually get in the creek or get right on the edge of the creek, come right down through the creek, pop up right there, right up into the tree. You could just see this being a place that once these cattle get out of here, a big old mature buck moves into and feels very, very comfortable and is left alone, very secluded back in here. This is awesome. I was on my way back to the truck and I'm like, man, I hated to leave here without getting a camera up, at least one. So I came back to this first little inside corner I found with all these overhanging limbs coming off these hedge trees next to the creek here, right along the edge of the creek. I went ahead and made 1, 2, 3, 4 mock scrapes right here on this little inside corner. And I plan on coming back to hanging that hackberry at some point. I don't think there's a lot of deer spending a lot of time on this property right now. This is going to be one of those places, like most of our permission pieces, where we don't get a lot of good summertime inventory for the most part, because a lot of our properties are very similar to this. It's mostly cattle pasture, and the deer right now are obviously super focused on the food. So typically the end of August, beginning of September, and on through September, the closer we get to fall is when the cameras are going to really start to pick up and those bucks are going to start to move back into those areas and start cruising through their fall ranges. So that's what I'm banking on with this camera. I'm going to go ahead and get it set up. I put a big card in there, so it's going to take a lot of pictures of a bunch of cattle probably, but I plan on staying out of here, so I wanted to go ahead and get one set up. And then as we move forward through the end of August and then into September, and these bucks are starting to move a little bit more, and they're starting to get back into their fall ranges, and they're not so hyper focused on just the food. My hope is we can see what kind of bucks are cruising through here, and hopefully they'll cruise right down this creek and start hitting these mock scrapes as we get closer to fall, and then actually into fall, into the season, October 1st. So all right, good to go. Camera set. Hopefully we can get some decent pictures at some point.